Have you ever noticed your AI chatbot starts guessing halfway through the chat? Watch what happens when it runs out of room to think and how to fix it. To understand this phenomenon, you need to understand memory, context windows, and short and long-term memory. Short-term memory is the memory that's used to make it seem like the large language model understands what you're saying. It takes a few pieces of your conversation and is able to reference that when it's creating responses. When they operate off of context windows, and that's basically the amount of text an AI model can process at once, working as its working memory, so that, again, you can have a coherent conversation with your chatbot or with your LLM. And in most cases, LLMs measure context windows by the number of tokens. And if you're not familiar with tokens, it's pieces of a word. For longer words like anti-disestablishmentarianism, tokens break the word down into anti-disestablishment. So if you're trying to guess what that word means, like these LLMs typically are, you break it down into anti-disestablishment. So anti against, dis against, establishment. So the person's against the people against the establishment. And that's how it comes up with the way that it writes, and that's how it understands the words that you use. Luckily for people using low code or no code tools, it's just based off of messages. And I'll show you how this works in the context of one of these low code tools. But I want to give you an example of what these context windows are. So let's say you start a conversation with your LLM and you say, I had oatmeal for breakfast and a sandwich for lunch and tacos for dinner. Now, this is where it gets interesting because on message 4, because the top context window is 3, it loses the context of that first message. So if you were to ask on the 4th message, what did I have for breakfast? It wouldn't be able to give you a good response. And I'm going to show you this in the context of N8N, which is one of these low code tools. Here we are in N8N. I've configured a pretty simple chatbot in here. I want to talk about the simple memory that we have attached to it. Now, if you see here, the context window is 3, so keep that in mind. Let's start talking to this chatbot. This morning, I woke up to my dog throwing up in bed. True story. Don't judge. My dog sleeps in my bed. You see that you get a response here. Then I took him outside to go to the bathroom. See, you got a response there. He felt better. He chased a few squirrels. Then we walked for 30 minutes. Now, here's where it gets interesting because remember the context window. If we ask this, what happened this morning when I woke up? Doesn't have a good response for you, right? And remember, that's that context window. So because we've got short-term simple memory attached to this AI chatbot, it can't give you a good response. Now that we understand short-term memory and some of the limitations, let's talk about long-term memory. Difference between short-term memory and long-term memory is that long-term memory uses the LLM plus data repository. In most cases for LLMs, this would be a vector database. When you're talking with a long-term memory, this, because it's connected to a database, you can now reference specific information regardless of how long ago or how many messages you've sent to it. So let me show you this in the context of this context window. So remember, originally with short-term memory, the context window was 3. I had oatmeal for breakfast and a sandwich for lunch and tacos for dinner. With a vector database and with long-term memory, this context window goes on to infinity in theory. So you can extend this context window as long as you'd like it to. So let me show you how this works in practice. Here we are in N8N again. This agent should look familiar. It's the same chatbot that we had earlier. Now we just have a Postgres memory chat and long-term memory associated with the Supabase vector database. So let's have the same conversation and see what kind of results we get. I woke up to my dog throwing up on the bed this morning. And you see it's referencing this Postgres chat memory. Still, it's a SQL database instead of the simple memory, but we're still not touching this long-term memory database yet. I took him to go to the bathroom outside. He felt better. He chased squirrels. And we walked for 30 minutes. We're at the moment of truth here. We still haven't touched the long-term database. So what happened this morning when I woke up? It's referencing this database, formulating a response. And you see they actually came up with the correct response here because it's referencing a database rather than working off of short-term memory. So this goes to show that when you put together a database that it can reference information on, you can reference that information in perpetuity. So what? Why do we care about this? A lot of revenue teams use these vector databases and the long-term memory to set up RAG agents, retrieval augmented generation. And like I mentioned before, gives you the LLM and it gives you a database to reference. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this. Few that I've seen in motion are things like customer success playbooks. If something goes wrong, most customer success teams have some kind of playbook in place to say, if this happens, then you should do this, right? We already referenced the customer chat history here. So if you had a conversation 6 months ago that was very extended, a RAG agent would be able to reference that previous history and bring that up in the conversation. So again, in the context of customer success, a lot of teams have chatbots associated with their websites like Drift or something along those lines. And if they have a problem, this RAG agent can help them figure that out based on the previous conversations that they had. And if this was the same problem they had previously, it makes the job even easier. And it saves the time and effort of the human being to go through that whole process again. Another thing that I see in terms of RAG is something like deal history. You're an enterprise company chasing enterprise clients. The sales cycle for these enterprise deals could be years. So somebody new could come in and say, hey, what happened within this account? Who's spoken with them? What kind of conversations have we had? Where are we in terms of making a deal? Now, these are just 3 examples. What else could we use a RAG agent for? I want to get the wheels turning. What do you think?